We are very lucky to be joined by Dr. Karen Shu today. Dr. Shu manages the Innovation Partnerships in Life Sciences portfolio for Innovation UBC. She also brings her perspective as a former research scientist herself, with experience in both academic and non-academic environments such as industry space. So thank you, Dr. Shu, for taking the time to share your wisdom with us today, and I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Nicole, for the kind introduction, and welcome to everybody to this progress session on partnering for impact. So as Nicole said, she already did the land acknowledgement, but my name is Karen, and I'm the child of settler parents here on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I'm offering today's presentation, and I acknowledge that you might be joining from other ancestral unceded lands near and far today. So the purpose of today is to share some of my observations from partnered research, from connecting with partners through alignment, funding, and outcomes. Just some things to consider when you're thinking ahead to success and impact. So why should I be the one talking to you about this? I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My role is within the portfolio of the VP Research and Innovation, and I'm an Innovation Partnerships Manager within the domain of life and health sciences. And I serve in a team of such colleagues supporting research connections between university colleagues and any and all external partners. Because we are a strategic partnerships team, we deal mostly with industry, but I've also brokered some very beautiful relationships between the university and nonprofit groups as well. So these range from your usual one-to-one sponsored research opportunities right up to strategic relationships that span large focus areas, multiple groups, and disciplines. And we also have a mighty team in Kelowna serving our Okanagan campus. So just for the purpose of today's talk, we'll be talking about partnerships with anybody outside of university that is not an academic entity. So our Innovation Partnerships team also sits then in a wider Innovation UBC team that comprises experts who support our faculty from a range of things that are attached to collaborative research, such as all the formalized agreements. And these are not just between industry, but also the agreements between governments and other agencies. And this would be in the sponsored research group. There's a team that supports university spinouts in the entrepreneurship team. And there's a team that supports intellectual property and licensing. And they used to call themselves the Technology Transfer Group, but now they're called Inventions and Licensing. I'll be referring to these groups throughout my presentation today. And together, these four groups form the wider mandate within Innovation UBC, which is to create impact from the amazing research happening here at the university. So the arc of today's presentation is generally going to flow like this. We're going to talk about the why of partnering. We'll talk about what things you might want to consider talking about when you've met a cool contact, either at a conference, and want to explore whether you could work together. And then we'll talk about a couple of things that people should be considering a little bit further down, first of all, upstream and then downstream. The first is funding pathways that might help make the most of your working with either a community or an industry partner, and some potential pathways and resources for when that research outcome can have impact beyond a scholarly publication. So our team at Innovation UBC certainly see partnering as one pathway to innovation. And you might be asking yourself the question, but is innovation part of that university mission? And what is innovation? So the answer to one is it sure can be. And the answer to two is if we define innovation as a process by which research yields not just new knowledge, which is the first scholarly mandate out of university, but to translate into impactful outcomes for society. And this could be in the form of products such as medicines or medical devices. I'm only going to be talking from the life sciences domains because that's where way my brain is wired. Or it could be in practices and policies such as HPV vaccination in high schools now, after 20 years of evidence saying that it's the right thing to do, and policies such as no smoking in indoor dining establishments. This could also be in the form of companies, public debate, and cultural shifts. And one way to move and amplify the work done in the academy in this impact space is via partnerships, which could be essential in ensuring that the end result is something that's actually useful and beneficial to the user or society. So why would you want to partner with industry? I can give you 4 reasons. The first of which is 2 or 3 are stronger than 1 always. By partnering, you're leveraging your existing funding, your expertise, your brain trust, and resources to do more together. And doing more, this is you might have increased research output because you are broadening the scope and the horizon of the focus that your current academic research program might be having. Aside from more, there's also an enrichment. There's some cross-pollination that naturally happens where you might unearth unmet needs and ideas that hadn't occurred to you before. What cross-pollination might also do is spanning the domains of both partners. So you're expanding your research focus and horizon, and thereby you might be opening yourself up to be eligible for other funding pathways. Community is another place where partnering could be happening. And we're really trying to move away from knowledge mobilization and dissemination to knowledge exchange. Community is more than a place that is a recipient of knowledge mobilization. For example, they could provide real-world relevance for your imagined solutions. Because I used to mentor at UBC, and part of the entrepreneurial spirit is to do your market research. How does your idea compare with current practice? And whether the idea that you had to perhaps solve a problem in the world is even a solution. I have a really nice anecdote I'd like to tell about this. About 3 years ago, I was reached in by a startup based on the Vancouver Island that was developing an app for persons living with Parkinson's patients who were experiencing speech aphasia, or aphasia as they would just call it. And they thought that we're designing a couple of features of this app that were offering solutions for some pain points for these patients. However, when this company went and did the market research with a few groups within the community, they were connected in with societies and with patient groups via outpatient clinics. They got feedback that the thing that they thought they were building didn't actually meet a pain point. And by way of gathering that feedback and doing their market research, they were able to pivot how they designed their app and what and from the current offerings to a new functionality that actually addressed aphasia and speech therapy, and also speech therapy exercises that persons living with aphasia could actually do to address their needs. So that was a really beautiful story of two-way exchange of how the community can enrich your research. Also, if there's interest and alignment, the connections with the community might offer real-world testing of your solutions, right, to assess how they actually perform in comparison with current ones. So presenting themselves, if there's alignment with that community group, a natural test bed of sorts. As with industry connections, there's going to be naturally some cross-pollination. Again, the synergy of your unmet needs, ideas, and maybe, as in the case of this app for speech aphasia, new use cases. And aside from the whole broader funding opportunities, the cross-pollination also ensures your work has real-world impact. So rounding back out to the relevance thing, seeing basically the changes that perhaps this company had made to this app actually working in the community for like a better future for these people. Okay, so you're at a conference or a networking event and you think you might have just met a future partner. What are some things that you might want to talk about? I can break it down into 4 pieces, and that's what I'll be talking about next. You always start with a why. I love Simon Sinek and I love his golden circle, and you always start with a why and what problem would you like to solve together, because that can give real context on whether you're talking about the same thing. How might each of you get there? And this gives you context as to whether or not you would actually be good partners, whether you are actually complementary. Another important piece is what will you get out of the project? It's very important to come at any mutual partnership with knowing that you're each offering something that the other needs, and you're both getting what you need out of the project. And then finally, two details. Just like with any marriage, you got to get the scary details out of the way, and that's funding and what to do with outcomes that may or may not be publishable or protectable. So the first three things might be very common sense and might be boring, but I'm going to talk through it anyway. It's not that you don't already know the what, but maybe I can shape the how around these three conversation topics. And the first is about problem definition, or starting with the why. What is the real world problem that both of you are interested in solving? I have another story around this. Sometimes partners think they know they're talking about the same problems when in actual fact, they're talking about very different aspects of a problem or seeing a problem from vastly different lenses. An example I have from a lived experience is that, let's say you've got a researcher meeting a clothing manufacturer at a conference on thermodynamics in materials. In this case, I was hosting a research roundtable, and they think they're talking about the issue of comfort, performance of fabric under extreme heat. And in the researcher's mind, and this researcher happens to be an engineer, the researcher would like to develop a national test standard for testing the fabric performance. While actually, when talking to the manufacturer later, they were actually thinking more of a human-based data set on how certain textiles feel. So very different ideas on what they thought was a common problem during the course of the conversation. And some ways to get clear on this is to answer the question, what needs changing? What are the current pain points? For whom are these pain points? And how are the current solutions failing? And who is it failing? And another way to talk about the problem is how things might change with your solution. What would the world look like after you've worked together? Who wins? I just find that just approaching this piece of the conversation by adding context and using active listening, you could really capture this important first understanding to see if you're even talking about the same problem. Next, outside of the why, it's the what part of the relationship. So you've talked about the problem that means something to both of you. Now it's time to talk about how you solve that problem. This sounds super common sense because this is likely the most natural part of the conversation. When you're excited about a thing or a problem that you'd like to solve, you're going to just naturally share your perspective on how you do it. And in the process, share which of your capabilities you'd be using to do this. But by actively listening to each other when you share this, you're gathering information about the next piece, which is what you both have to offer. Where do each of you have expertise and resources, and where could each of you use support or an external collaborator? And when you guys share this, you're able to figure out if the jigsaw pieces of your respective expertise and resources fit to form a collaborative project that actually gets to the finish line. And finally, it's important to be upfront with both potential challenges and opportunities that arise when you're working together. Do either of you have a deadline or time urgency for this work? Are extra or third-party resources necessary for the project? And and maybe one of you has an inside scoop on maybe an upcoming federal initiative that you might co-apply for. So that's really important to talk about, like opportunities and challenges in any potential project. And finally, once you've gotten past the technical pieces of that particular project or the really scientific niche pieces of the project, I like to call this part of the conversation the what's in it for me piece. Again, this slide might seem super basic because many of these items that I'm going to talk about is made as assumptions. But in my experience, all great partnerships are built on mutual agreement. That both partners are getting something of value out of working together. So while you might already be excited about working with a partner because you know your research is going to have real world impact, it's going to broaden your research horizons and include a new application or use case, or even open up a new funding avenue in the form of your partner, say so to your partner. Conversely, don't be shy about saying that by partnering with you in UBC, your partner is tapping into academic research excellence, talented students and research fellows. They've got a pathway to unlock matched funding via federal programs that are only available through universities. And the case is a larger partnership, a public one or a strategic one. Brand alignment might be important to the partner as well. And finally, these last two details, funding and outcomes. So the first is funding. Research is work and requires human and material resources. So talk about the budget for this work. Does your partner have funds? What can they offer in kind? If the partner's budget is insufficient, or if you want to be ambitious, is the partner open to co-applying for grants? And what would be the timeline for this? And this is one source of tension and friction between the academy and industry, as some of the audience might already know, is that industry works at a much faster pace than the academy, and it's always worth having that conversation and to lay it out for any industry and private partners that funding instruments and agencies have their own calendar, their own schedules, and their own cycles, that peer review is involved to ensure that the research is of high quality, and to factor that into any timeline that you might be imagining together. Next, outcomes. So what if magic happens and the project is very successful? So the very first thing is publishing. Knowledge dissemination and research articles are part of university mission, and the partner should be made aware and plans made to ensure that you and your trainees can publish. And in the case that the results can be taken further to applicable solutions, it's worth talking about what the partner envisions in terms of intellectual property, what are their thoughts on this, and licensing. Just by asking open questions without assumptions, that's the most important part, and gathering information in an open way, it's the best way to gather the information so that down the line, the right teams at UBC, and I'll be talking about these later, can support you in drafting the agreement with the industry partner. So next, I'm going to be talking about some funding pathways that colleagues working in mental health might consider when working with partners. What's not in scope of this talk and in the next section are, as I mentioned at the beginning of the hour, purely academic collaborations, because those are largely funded, can largely be funded by federal and provincial funding initiatives and also university initiatives. And also not in scope of this next section are clinical trials, because that has its own set of investigator and industry sponsored regulations. I'm talking here about research projects, academic research projects with outside partners. So let's talk about community partners first. If you're thinking about working with a community partner, such as a society or nonprofit community group, here are some pathways that you might want to talk about when the idea of funding comes up. I'll just be straight up from my experience. Partner funding for nonprofits and societies is usually extremely limited or non-existent. You'll likely need to supplement with other sources. If there is a society that supports that partner's particular interests, they may well have funding for the work. And I imagine the audience here is deeply acquainted with groups such as the BC Mental Health and Substance Use Service and the BC Schizophrenia Society Foundation, among others. Health Research BC partners with some societies. It's a very limited list, but they do partner with some health societies to make their funds go further. And you can check out their website for all the partnered awards that they support. And finally, foundations are another avenue to explore. They fund both independently in terms of the actual project, but this is usually via very specific calls. So be mindful to read through that language, or in partnership with societies. So if you're working with industry partners, they'll presumably have more technical and financial resources to contribute to the project. So let's say you've been talking to a partner and you've gotten to a space where you've found alignment. You both have a mutual what's in it for me in there, and you feel that this partnership is going to work for the particular project. And miracle of miracles, that partner has funding. First of all, who can help you get to this agreement? Because whenever you partner with an industry partner, it's important to have an agreement in place. This would be a UBC-sponsored research group, and they're the ones who draft, revise, and negotiate the formal agreements that support this collaboration. And before you reach out to them, you'll have to write a research project description and budget and fill out a research project information form. And if you're bored already, it's because this is really no different from a grant. It's the same process. The only difference being that you'll have to submit all of these documents to the sponsored research group, or the SRG, rather than the Office of Research Services. When you're drafting your budget, some considerations to do is to check your faculty's rate for indirect costs of research. These indirect costs are applied to any project that is a non-academic research collaboration, and should be basically a percentage on top of the whole budget of that project. I don't remember what it is for Faculty of Medicine. I do remember for other faculties, it can be up to it's between 25 and 40%. So please check your faculty's indirect cost of research. And another consideration when drafting up a project before you submit is if your project requires ethics review and the attention of the Behavioral Research Ethics Board, unless you have a current certificate for work that is either identical or has heavy overlap with the current work that you are suggesting or you're proposing in the project, this will be a new review by the board, and any industry-sponsored studies have an associated $3,500 review fee, and this has to be factored in the budget. Because in the early days of my partnership work, I did run into some instances where the project was approved, the budget was approved, and then a new ethics research certificate had to be submitted, and then this invoice for this fee came up and it was not factored in the budget, and you don't want to have that. So let's say you've got a budget and you're talking to the partner and you're writing it all the documents in, and you've realized that actually there's a tool to help leverage that industry partner's funding a little bit further. I can't think of a single industry partner who would say no if you said you could make their money go a little bit further. If your industry partner project involves undergraduate, graduate, and/or postdoctoral fellows doing the work and is not clinical in nature, MyTax might be a great way to leverage your partner's funds. So MyTax is an ISID-funded initiative, so it's federally funded with heavy co-funding from provincial governments, and the overall objective is to support the Canadian innovation ecosystem by way of supporting trainees and their industry experience. And trainees is, in this sense of the word, university students and research fellows. So just a little bit about the MyTax partnerships. This can be between the academy, government, and public and private sectors within Canada. And the partnerships have to just involve one academy partner, which is usually the research supervisor, obviously the trainee, because this money is meant to fund trainee salaries. And this trainee could be the undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral research fellow level, and a non-academy partner. So this could be either industry, big industry to small industry, or I've also had societies with a little bit of funding also use MyTax for their business operation expansion needs as well. And the partner funds are largely matched one-to-one by MyTax. So MyTax most popular and very and deeply used program is the Accelerate program. And I'll just talk a little bit about how this program is structured. The projects are usually designed in 4 or 6 month time modules called internship they have to be able to be like split up in that way. And that's because each IU is worth $15,000 with one-to-one contribution. So $7,500 contribution by the partner matched with a $7,500 grant from my tax for each IU. And within each full IU of 15,000, at least $10,000 must be assigned towards the trainee salary, with up to, and this is discretionary to the research supervisor, up to $5,000 of flex, what they call flex funding that is allocatable to research costs. And if you'd like to learn more about the Accelerate program, please check out the MyTax website. So as mentioned before in the community partnering funding pathway, Health Research BC also participates in partnered awards with societies. They do this with industry and MyTax, and this is a fabulous way of helping your partners' funding go even further. Of note, though, Health Research BC, because of the name, it has to be for collaboration with a for-profit company, and they heavily emphasize two items of note. It has to be a small or medium enterprise within BC's life sciences sector, because Health Research BC is meant to be enriching the life sciences ecosystem in the province. So the program details for leveraging, double leveraging via Michael Smith Health Research and MyTax is that industry placements are anywhere between 8 and 24 months. And the funding caps or maximums for a 24-month term is either $90,000 for a graduate student or $129,000 for a research fellow for the 2 years, with a maximum industry partner contribution of $22,500 for graduate students and $30,000 for a research fellow. And this is again for the full 2-month term. And how it works is that there's a first matching of this partner contribution by MyTax, and then a further matching through Health Research BC for the remainder of whatever term there is. So the competition sort of like, so whereas MyTax is a rolling submission, you can submit anytime, there are no deadlines whatsoever. With Health Research BC and MyTax, the competition for the 2025 year is open right now. They are accepting letters of intent from June to December of this year. And letters of intent that are invited for full proposal will be invited at the end of December for an end of January submission date. And I believe my last information is that there are 30 placements available for this cycle. And if you'd like to learn more, please have a look at the Health Research BC website. So the next piece of the talk is funding outcomes and who is there to walk you through it. Okay, so this is an incredibly busy and unreadable slide, but all I'm meaning to show is that the province's life sciences research ecosystem is super active and is generally comprised of all the research universities on the left hand of the slide that may go through, and sometimes multiple partnered opportunities with smaller or local companies, and that's all of the companies circled in the middle of the slide, before ending up either being licensed or before being licensed out to larger global companies on the right-hand side. The slide was prepared by Novature Ventures, which is a local VC company. And I absolutely love this slide because it shows how busy we are and how much Innovation UBC teams are needed to help and support the build successes along the way. So how do you make the most of a research outcome that blows your socks off and just might change the world? This can't be a talk on IP itself and what to do with it, but suffice it to say that the university has really clear rules on what background intellectual property is and how to handle joint inventions. But in general, the very general rule is with industry-sponsored, university-executed research, where the researcher has the sole inventive role in any intellectual property that might arise, this IP is considered to belong to the university with the inventor named. However, the policy is that UBC will grant the sponsoring partner or the inventor, if asked, under certain agreements, a fully paid up, non-exclusive, perpetual, sub-licensable, transferable, royalty-free, worldwide license to use and exploit the UBC inventions without any further accounting to UBC. This is to the sponsoring industry partner under certain agreements. And for inventors and startups, there's a different set of agreements. But all suffices to say, even though the university owns that IP, there are always ways to assign use of that IP to the inventors and to sponsoring groups. Suffice it to say that all these and other considerations will be papered by, again, the sponsored research group when you do your collaborative research agreement. So if you think you've made an invention, and if so, there are domain experts in the inventions and licensing team at UBC who are eager to listen to your journey and ask the right question, answer yours for future work considerations, and guide you through an invention disclosure and further downstream. They're extremely helpful, and I've seen this firsthand in meetings that I've sat in giving guidance when you've like to partner with a company. But if you yourself might have considerations around prior art or IP or background IP and how that might impact the incomes, they're very, very adept at this. And all you need to do is reach out to that team, and they will schedule a meeting with you before basically chaperoning on future talks and downstream talks with that partner. And finally, if you think you've stumbled upon a solution that might merit its own venture to bring it into the wide world, and certainly if you were already talking about IP that is protectable and have submitted an invention disclosure, the team at Inventions and Licensing will signal this to you that this might be worthwhile of a venture. And you think you have the energy to take the leap, this very scary and brave leap into entrepreneurship, the ventures team has an entire network and programming to coach you through the crucial first years of your startup. Via this and via collaboration with Isaacs, the venture team also has maker and office spaces on offer for select ventures. So I'm coming to the end of my talk, and here I've just put together a short list of resources where you could gather timely information that could help your partnered research journey. I've already talked about the sponsored research group and the MyTax Accelerate and Health Research BC. For double leveraging, that might be appropriate for researchers within the Institute of Mental Health. But if you haven't already subscribed, the UBC Research Digest is a useful newsletter to keep notified of not just provincial and tri-agency, but also non-tri-agency and society funding calls that might be occurring in the ecosystem. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you for joining.